speak about meditation as a source of joy. What I propose to do is not to touch on the theoretical aspects of meditation, but rather to share my experiences as a meditator, and also sharing with you the experiences I have had in encountering meditators over the years.
Acharya Godwin Samararatne was one of the best-known lay meditation teachers in Sri Lanka in recent times. Based at his meditation center at Nilambe in the Central Hill Country near Kandy. After his death in March 2000, letters and tributes poured in as many people around the world attested to the impact that Godwin and his teaching had made on their lives. Godwin was born 6 December 1932. He grew up as one of 7 children in a Kandy-based family in the Central Hills of Sri Lanka. He attended a well-reputed Buddhist school, but later admitted to neglecting his studies there in favor of exploring the deeper philosophical questions of life. After school, he became a librarian, serving in libraries in and around the Kandy area before being promoted to the post of chief librarian at the main Kandy Public Library. While his brothers and sisters all married, Godwin remained living at home, devotedly supporting his widowed mother until her death in 1977. By that time, Godwin was already involved with a Buddhist lay group who were studying the Dhamma and practicing meditation. In early 1979, a prosperous Kandian businessman, Mr. P.B. Allahakun, announced that he would donate some land from his tea estate for the establishment of a meditation center and pay for construction of some buildings. This became the foundation of the Nilambe Meditation Center. Godwin left his job as librarian in Kandy and took residence in the new center, at first to be the caretaker, but subsequently he became the center's chief meditation teacher. Godwin based his teaching on his own practice and the understanding he gained of the Dhamma through that. He had no particular teacher himself, but he discussed the Buddha's teaching widely with many experienced monks, scholars, and other meditators. News soon spread about Godwin and the new center, passed on by word of mouth by those who had been there and benefited from their stay. Young Westerners especially, who were seeking a spiritual dimension to their lives, were attracted to the center, appreciating Godwin's ability to translate the Dhamma into a language relevant to people's everyday lives and concerns. Godwin's reputation as a meditation teacher grew steadily throughout the 80s, both in Sri Lanka and abroad. By the mid-80s, Godwin had already been invited to teach in Europe and South Africa, and he became, over time, an internationally acclaimed and much loved teacher. In the 1990s, his teaching tours extended to many countries, including England, Germany and Holland, and other Asian countries such as India, Singapore and Hong Kong. Fortunately, many of the talks and retreats he gave on these tours were recorded. At the end of 1999, he made another teaching trip to South Africa and Botswana, and it was shortly after his return to Sri Lanka that he passed away on 22nd March 2000 in Peradeniya Hospital of a progressive liver disease. He was 67 years old.
This feeling of being grateful touched me deeply when I visited Bodh Gaya, the place where the Buddha was said to have become enlightened. And according to the story, after enlightenment, he spent 1 week looking at the tree, feeling grateful for the tree which gave him shelter. Just reflect, spending 7 days showing your gratitude to a tree.
friends, I think after the beautiful chanting, we have a lot of space in our mind. So I thought it might be meaningful to do some meditation. And this morning at the reservoir, we tried to experience what is called egolessness in the Dhamma. So I like to give a guided meditation, and I hope at least you will have a glimpse of what it is to experience this important and profound teaching in the Dhamma, to experience emptiness or to experience a state of egolessness. So I like you to sit in a comfortable position. And you can allow any thoughts, any emotions, any sensations to arise. Whatever you may be experiencing, whether it is a thought, a sensation, an emotion, or hearing a sound, see how far you can relate to them without a sense of ownership. So if you are experiencing a thought, just see how far you can relate to it as a thought and not as my thought. If you are experiencing a sensation, see how far you can relate to that sensation as just a sensation and not my sensation or my pain or whatever. Can you relate to your thoughts without a sense of ownership, just as thoughts? Sadness, fear, boredom, guilt, joy. Can you also relate to them without a sense of ownership? It is just sadness. It is just feeling of boredom. And just allow it, just let it be, just surrender to it. If you are experiencing any unpleasant sensations in the body, tensions, pressure, pain, can you relate to those sensations just as sensations, not relating to them as my pain, but their pain, not my tension, but their tension. Learning to relate to them without a sense of ownership. If you are resisting something, it means that it is your ego that is resisting. So can you make friends with your thoughts? Just allow them. Can you make friends with your emotions, whatever the emotions are, by just allowing them? Can you make friends with your sensations, even if they are unpleasant sensations? Just letting them be. try to say something very briefly about this doctrine of anatta, or emptiness or egolessness, which is extremely difficult to comprehend and practice, and it's not easy to communicate the different dimensions of this teaching. I like to offer some practical guidelines how one can work with our egos. One area where our egos operate is in the relationships we have with people. So whenever we have conflicts, whenever we suffer in relating to other people, that is due to our egos. So the bigger the ego, the bigger the hurt. So it is very interesting what happens when we are hurt by another person. Then what do? We immediately hurt the other person. So we continue to hurt each other. It's like a game of ping pong. There is a beautiful definition of a mind that is innocent. A mind that is innocent is a mind that is incapable of being hurt, therefore incapable of hurting another. Beautiful definition of innocence. So next time you are hurt, if you can just observe why you are hurt, this is where you can confront your ego. We are hurt in relation to another person when we had a model of how the other person should have behaved. So when the other person behaves according to your model, he or she is a wonderful person. You won't be hurt. So if you can stay with that hurt without hurting the other person, if you can work through that hurt, that will be a way of working with your ego. So this is one guideline I like to offer, especially in relationships. I feel relationships are a very important area in our spiritual path. They can be a mirror to how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to others. So this is one guideline. Another guideline is this sense of ownership that we have, where we assume that we own things. And this arises mostly from language. We can be conditioned by language we use. We say, this is my body. So we assume that you own your body. This is my wife. So you assume that your wife belongs to you. So this is what we do in life all the time. We have accumulated things and we assume that we own them. We even assume that we own cats. This is my cat. And the other cat, the neighbor's cat, is different from my cat. There's hardly a difference between the two cats. There's a very profound point to reflect on this. If we own things, we should be taking these things after death as well. So if we are leaving anything behind at death, it means that we are leaving everything which we have not owned. Please reflect on this important aspect. So while living, can you relate to these things without a sense of ownership? Then you can live happily, then you can die happily. Buddha had presented a very powerful argument in relation to ownership, which is close to what I said earlier. He said that if we own things, we should be able to control things. Very interesting point. Can we control what is happening in our body? Do you know what sensation you might experience in 5 minutes? Do we control our minds? Do you know what thought you will have in 3 minutes? But here again, because of our egos, we assume that we control things. But when we realize that in relation to ourselves and to external events, there is hardly any control. There can be a limited degree of control, but when one realizes this, then what happens is, then you realize or you learn to surrender to what happens. Otherwise, when we assume we can control things, and when we find that we cannot control things, we start resisting. So here we learn, rather than resisting, surrendering, flowing with things. How can there be suffering then? It's a beautiful way to live, surrendering and just flowing with things, whatever that is happening. And even your actions, this doesn't mean that you have to be passive. Even your actions just flow from that space. Perhaps the last suggestion I like to offer to work with is to ask this question: who am I? Who is experiencing this pain? Who is experiencing this hurt? Who is trying to be enlightened? Who is trying to experience calm or whatever? Just to raise that question. Then ideally you may have a glimpse that this who is merely an assumption, that we assume that there is a who, an entity, an ego, apart from that experience. And it is that who wants things differently. So it comes back to the exercise we did this morning. We experience only thoughts, sounds, sensations, emotions. Is there anything apart from that?